4x4 is a two-part programme exploring themes of dance, body and the environment. The two parts is 4x4 AIR, Artist in Residency programme, which provided two opportunities for people who worked in dance or physical-based theatre to do a 2-week residency each, and the 4x4 Lab, which is what we're on at the moment. This is the second 4x4 programme that we had. The first one was 2011, and the 2014 4x4 Dance, Body and the Environment is taking place at the outdoor natural environment around Findhorn, the dunes and the woodlands, and here on the Isle of Egg, and one of the small isles of the west coast of Scotland.
I think BodySurf is really interested in facilitating and mentoring movement-based artists to build a practice that's relating to environment and landscape. And so when Carl asked me to do this BodySurf 4x4, he was interested in really making sure that people had time for their individual practice.
We invited Jennifer Monson, who's a choreographer and dancer and teacher and is director of Island Art, based in the United States. We first invited Jennifer over on the first 4x4 Dance Body Environment project in 2011, which took place at Findhorn and Glenmoriston in the Highlands. And I was very keen to invite Jennifer back to lead, to facilitate, to mentor the artist on this 10-day lab.
In this workshop, I'm trying not to necessarily implement my own strategies, but to draw on the experience of the group as a way of asking these questions, bringing everybody's definition of body and environment into the equation, talking a lot about that, asking the participants to propose questions to themselves as they're experiencing each other's work and their own.
To be facilitated and given also inspiration from not only Jennifer and the group to go into the environment. I mean, that's quite a rare thing, because we could do this by ourselves, if you like. We could find a field and we could do it, but it's completely different if you've got people to check in with or people to give you stimulus for ideas. So they're very different things.
One of the first things that we discussed, not as a group, but just individually, and that I kind of came to the conclusion that we were all kind of exhaling because there were people that were interested in similar things and had the same want to produce or to make or to experience, and it was a bit of an exhalation just to go, we're here and we're all here to do this, and this is why it's like, yes, we're here with the same people and we're talking in a similar language that we can translate or, encourage new communication and things like that.
Every day there's been something new that shook me. I think the first day where we worked a lot on sharing our own practices, so that self-reflection of what you do was quite interesting. I used a music piece and then we went for a walk and gathered some objects and then exchanged the other object as a gift, and I think that will remain me, that specific exercise will remain with me mostly because it hit me somewhere inside and I'm not quite sure where or how.
It's a way of creating a supportive container for people to work individually, but with a sense that everyone's working individually, but there's a kind of collective practice that we can draw on.
We really spent a lot of time doing this checking in, checking out, and just listening to each other talk about what we've been up to rather than for criticising. So actively listening, and I feel like that's helped me to take greater risks, but also somehow more generous in the way that I share what I'm up to, and also the more generous in what I feel like I'm hearing from people.
And everyone's actually really quite different artists that are here. And we're all, either from Scotland or some people are from down south, and it feels like, even though other people who, I guess, have a concern for sustainability or ecological thinking in their arts practice, and it's becoming a thing, I think it's so unknown and so I don't think there should be or are any rules about what that would mean for art making. And I think that it makes me kind of go, oh yeah, other people are grappling with these questions and doing things through art and developing things, because I think it can feel quite like separate from other art when people go, oh, you're the sustainability environmental artist.
We felt that it was important that artists, and dance artists in particular, address some very fundamental issues in our relationship with the natural environment, and the belief that artists have something to contribute to the conversation, to the debate, to the critical need for action to be taken. And I think typically dance movement artists haven't been seen as playing a very major role in that. Typically, photographers, visual artists have seen of having an established role in engaging with the environment.
Thinking about taking things away from the space so that it could have a new history, to provide a blank canvas within such a messy sort of terrain. And I have an interest in archaeology anyway, so I decided to excavate a piece of ground. I used a twig, the branch as a measurement, and used that as a tool to measure the space that I wanted to excavate so that it was perfectly square, so that there was a contrast between the natural and the thing that was constructed and taken away from the space, I suppose. When it was about the process of digging it as well, I got quite hot and sweaty through doing it, and I developed a sort of repetitious technique to how I was going to break up the surface so that I could get in about and pull it out.
I've come to believe more and more that places choose you the same as you choose them. At the end of the day, the place, nature, has got the final word. This place chose me, and I chose it because I realized in a sanctuary, everything is sacred. Madness, distress, despair. And it gives me an understanding and an acceptance. Disrupting a space there can be also harmony in a disruption.
You know, in the beginning of this workshop, we're just spending a lot of time being in the environment and letting each person's individual experience of that calm down, settle, begin to rise, let their creative practices start to help them think about how they are in the place, settle, new things arise, sharing that, being influenced by other people's experience, going out again, and gradually we're getting to the place where we're beginning to articulate what are the questions that are coming up for you, what are the concerns.
It's very much an investigation. And dancing is always an investigation. And that's what it is, a way of thinking. Or it is thinking, it is a thought. And when we dance in landscape or dance outside, I think that's a place of focusing that element of dancing, that it's an investigation, because you experience your investigation of being there and your engagement with the environment.
Almost asking the question, what am I invited to do here? And like having that as the frame of movement, what's inviting me and what am I being invited to do?
Just digging. Digging. It's a really nice activity. I've never really dug holes before. So it's a new experience. And I also realised when you get involved with the landscape, like when you build a fire, you realise how little you know about the characteristics of a fire. Or when you get involved with the ocean, you realise how little you know about the characteristics of what it can do, when it does it, and all that. So I think that's what I find enjoyable, is exploring what these elements are that we're surrounded by. So I'm going to find out tomorrow what happens, and I'm going to sit in the hole tomorrow. But yeah, that's what I'm doing. I don't know, I'm really interested in how things are affected by movement. So trying to sort of set up a structure or a situation where things can be affected, and then put the body in there as a neutral point that is also affected. I think that's where it's going.
For me, because I feel like the studio is the place where I look at my physical body, that when I come out into the environment, it's a way of waking up the other senses, the way of waking up the touch in a different way, or the smell, or the sound in a different way than you'd ask for yourself in the studio. So I feel like these senses come into play, and how do I start to think about those in terms of making performance work or being involved in performances.
The group of people is already asking quite complicated questions, like what is a body, what is environment, and in looking at each other's practices and then talking about them, those discussions are starting to bring up different ways of thinking about that.
We talk about like the body and landscape, really problematic, because it's a mantra form that is like removed from, we talk about the body is this, the body is that. I don't know what we're talking about, because I'm not just a body, the body, I'm talking about me, or a person, and body and mind and speaking and emotion, it's all like one thing. So that's all connected for me.
Sometimes in art I see myself in the back of my mind as a practice, especially in dance movement, to give some beauty. Yeah, to be good, especially on stage. All these questions, we artists, we have this in mind, even consciously or not, but we're always into this motion, appearing, giving, but also thinking about what we give.
With the environment, there's, it's such a complicated term, but what I'm mostly thinking about is these kind of phenomenon of ecological systems that, include the cultural and historical, social and political aspects of an environment. So it's such a complicated and layered experience. So somehow these very simple practices, it's going to slow you down and allow you to begin to find your own interests, and then let those be influenced and opened up by other people's interests.
It's quite intimate, and it's quite empowering as well. I think you've got quite a lot of support, and so you feel more like you want to risk more in what you do.
I feel much more able to give myself permission to be somewhere, and things come up that feel important as a result from just experiencing being somewhere. So even this morning I started thinking about the project I'm doing, and I did make a decision not to think directly about it, not to force myself not to, but not to force myself to think about it. And I just started thinking about some things to do with the process, because I'll be working with people of different ages, and professionals and non-professionals, and I just was thinking, yeah, I do want to just go outdoors with them. So I was feeling a bit dubious about whether I could do that, whether I felt confident enough to do that. And I think for me, just doing and being outdoors and exploring just confirmed a lot.
What I came here with the intention to do has completely changed to what we've been exploring. I think my idea, and there's been a different interest in what I've been working with as well. And I've literally just changed my mind again.
There's a linear thing up here that I did based on deconstruction, which was a bit of a mess, which I reconstructed. And I was thinking about the journey I'd taken, like footsteps, or the breaks between the journey that I was on, the in-betweens, or even between thought process. And it was the tree that had been chopped down previously. I just hit upon it, and as soon as I saw it, this idea came into mind, and I just constructed it. Again, it was in the process of lifting and finding and adjusting the pieces so that they came into alignment. And then today, I had in mind, because I'm from this area, originally, and I met my mother last night, I think it might have had something to do with it. And it feels like almost like a bit of a pilgrimage, a homecoming type thing. And with the notion of home, I started to make a nest, and this is the thing that I created.
I'm interested in how different people with different disciplines and different practices, and therefore different perspectives on things, can inform and support each other. As artists, offering a different perspective on our relationship with the environment, with the planet, and as artists, learning from the experience and knowledge and skills of people in other disciplines, whether it's scientists, natural historians, etc.
I don't make any sense of them. I just wanted them, maybe because of the colors. I like the reds, moss, wood, leaves, and again, they just have their own reality by themselves.
When you're dancing in a landscape, your perspective is constantly being shifted, and you're moving through kind of spatial and temporal form that is responding to the spatial and temporal phenomenon of the landscape itself, or perceiving them. So there's a very complex way that dance is able to perceive landscape that's somewhat unique to dance. It's different than, say, visual art or music in some ways, because of its movement and the kind of ephemerality of it. So I think in that way, body and environment, or dance and looking at ecosystems, it's, makes sense to me.
Somehow, when we talk about like dancing in the environment or dancing in the landscape, there's a sense of that we're connecting to this wildness, or this like constant movement and constant change of, you know what I mean? And that there's a speed of change, sometimes very fast, or also like very slow, like the speed of a stone changing, or, and you're tapping into a perception or investigation of all of that. So you have that, and then you're staying in a place that's where there's very codified structures of organization and people.
Well, I think both for Findhorn and for here, it's kind of a philosophy to the way of working with the landscape that you wouldn't see if you were just going to like a backpackers in Loch Ness. There's a you gain the understanding of how to approach the environment from different angles, and whether it's about the community, like I feel like it's in Findhorn, it's about the community coming together to work together to things like the wind turbines. And then here it's very much about, in some ways, survival and growing the right plants and taking care of the community and make sure everyone's got the wood or the things that they need for basic survival. So I feel like this has also really influenced the way that we approach our work.
You know, I can walk around and do things that I would usually try and go where there's no one else, because it's a bit weird at first when I'm just exploring. But I feel like here I feel quite held, I guess, even though I haven't spoken to that many people who live here.
One of the things I think I try and do is to kind of destabilize some of our assumptions or patterns or habits of our intention in the environment. And one of the ways I do that is, or I suggest that people do that, through these leading and following exercises. So one person is guiding you through the landscape, one or two other people. And in that moment, when I think often when we're moving from one place to another, we have a real specific intention or orientation. And when someone else is guiding you, there's a possibility to really let go of that, and then you can be really present with the experience of what you're doing. So you can really focus on what you're listening to or the quality of the ground underneath you, which you can do when you're walking intentionally, but there's something that loosens up when you're not focusing on where you're going, you're just going.
Why is it more relevant or better to be investigating a sand dune than it is to be investigating the caravan park? Like, why is the sand dune more of the place than the caravan park? Is it because it's not man-made in a way that I can recognize, or is it, you know what I mean? So there's an awkwardness.
We chose Findhorn because that's Bodysurf Scotland's base, and it's a community that is set within a rural context. It has access to the beach and dunelands and woodlands, and also human-managed environments with the gardens. And the Isle of Eigg because we're very interested and curious in the Isle of Eigg as an experiment. It has a strong sustainability focus. The island is owned by the community itself. We're staying here in Earth Connections, which is an eco residential centre. We were very interested in the community's commitment to such things as generating its own electricity.
Definitely being on Eigg is going to be a really strong moment for many of us. The fact that we can kind of explore this environment without feeling that there are that many people around or that we will get necessarily lost. We can kind of carefully explore this whole environment, and there are so many different landscapes within Eigg.
This land is it's of a scale of a body. You walk through it and you feel the farmers who have walked through it for generations and built the rock walls and put up the fences. And you can really imagine a body doing it. It's not like a landscape, say in Illinois, where you can only imagine a machine doing the work that, something really vast and huge. So it's quite beautiful, this landscape, for exploring the habitus of the body in relationship to place.
Someone said to me once, here in Scotland, the land calls its people back. And I feel it very, very much here. The land, their energies, nature, the people, the discussions, the practices. There are elements feeding my practice and also feeding my research. So it's a lot of inputs actually, but those inputs are crucial for me in terms of who I am, where I want to go as an artist, what I want to do, what I can give, and where I receive my inspiration.
Feels like we're accumulating a lot of questions and a lot of possible answers. But there's an intelligence to the group that's building, I think, through these questions and investigations and practices. There's an unfolding of the information and that witnessing and responding that I think is really valuable and something that you can only get from if you're in a group.
Just now in the large room here in Earth Connections, Jennifer's been leading the group in a morning movement practice. They've been working in different dance movement practices in the morning together. A bit of what gets called authentic movements, some body work, some imagery, working with hands-on. And they're just about to finish that, and we're going to go for a walk with Camille, who is one of the residents and the community members here on Egg. And she is a local historian. So we're just getting ready to go. Coffee's been drunk, coats are being put on, and we're going to go off for a walk along the shore.